When Keanu Reeves smiled through pain, the night was cold, but the lights of the city were warm. Keanu Reeves walked into the quiet backstage area of an event hall. His steps were steady, but his eyes carried a weight that only a few could see. The crowd outside had cheered for him, as they always did, but behind his smile there was a silence no one could hear. He had been carrying pain, a kind of pain that never shows on the face but lives deep in the heart, the kind of pain that teaches you to stay strong when the world is watching. Ana de Armas noticed it first. She had been sitting near the side of the stage, watching the people walk by, waiting for her turn to step out. When Keanu walked past her, she saw the faint curve of his lips, the polite smile that everyone thought was natural. But Ana saw something more. She saw how the smile did not reach his eyes. She had seen that look before, in people who try to carry the world but forget that they too need kindness. She stood quietly and followed him a few steps, as if drawn by something she could not explain. Sydney Sweeney was in the corner, speaking softly with a stage assistant. She turned when she heard Ana call Keanu's name. There was something in the tone, gentle but full of worry. Sydney's eyes followed them, and in that moment she also felt it, the shadow behind his calm presence. It was strange how the strongest people often carried the heaviest wounds, and yet still chose to give the world their light. Sydney walked toward them, curious but also careful, as if she knew this moment mattered. Keanu sat on a chair backstage, away from the bright lights. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, and stared at the floor. His hands were still, but his chest rose and fell in slow, measured breaths. He looked like a man holding himself together by threads that no one else could see. When Ana stepped closer, he looked up at her, and for a moment, his eyes revealed the storm he had been hiding. Then, as always, he gave a small smile as if to say, "I am fine." But it was a smile born from habit, not from truth. "You don't have to smile if it hurts," Ana said softly. Her voice carried no judgment, only warmth. Keanu blinked, surprised because very few people ever said that to him. Most wanted the image of strength, the perfect actor who always stood calm, always humble, always respectful. But here was someone who saw through the mask. Sydney came closer, her presence quiet but steady. She stood by Ana's side and added, "Sometimes kindness to yourself is the hardest thing to give." For a long moment there was silence. The only sound was the muffled noise of the crowd cheering outside. Keanu leaned back, looking at both of them. His heart felt heavy, but something about their words gave him air to breathe. He wanted to say something, but the words were trapped, so instead he just smiled again. This time softer, less forced, more human. It was a smile of gratitude, not of defense. Ana and Sydney exchanged a glance. They did not need to speak to understand each other. Both of them knew that this was not about pride, not about image, not about the show outside. This was about a man who had given so much respect and kindness to others, and now needed someone to choose kindness for him. They sat beside him, not asking questions, not pushing, simply being there. And in that quiet moment, Keanu realized that sometimes true strength was not about standing alone, but about letting others stand with you. The minutes stretched, and the energy in the room changed. What began as a moment of hidden pain turned into a small circle of trust. For Keanu, it felt strange and yet healing. He had spent years giving, offering his humility and resilience to the world, but rarely letting anyone see his own struggles. Yet here, with Ana and Sydney, he did not feel the need to hide. He felt safe, and safety, for a man who lived in silence, was the most powerful gift. As the stage manager called his name, he rose. His body was steady, but his heart was lighter. He looked at Ana and Sydney, and for the first time in a long while, he spoke with honesty. "Thank you," he whispered. It was only 2 words, but they carried the weight of 1,000 unspoken emotions. Ana placed a hand over his arm. and Sydney gave a small nod. They had chosen kindness over pride, and in doing so, they had given him something more than comfort. They had reminded him that even in pain, he was not alone. And as he stepped toward the stage, his smile was different. It was still gentle, still humble, but this time it was real. The stage and the silence. The hall was full, and the sound of applause rose like a wave as Keanu stepped onto the stage. The lights shone bright on him, but for the first time that evening, his heart felt a little lighter. He had carried pain in silence, and yet, just minutes before, two people had reminded him that kindness could reach even the deepest wounds. As he looked at the crowd, he remembered their faces, Anna's gentle words, Sydney's quiet strength. Those memories gave him strength now. The audience expected the usual calm Keanu. They expected humility, grace, and that smile which had always felt like a gift. But tonight, there was something new in his presence. His voice was steady when he greeted them, but there was a softness, a rawness, that made every word feel real. People leaned forward in their seats, sensing that this was not just another speech, not just another appearance. Something about the silence between his words drew them closer. As he spoke about resilience, about how life tests everyone, a small tremor entered his voice. It was not weakness, it was truth, and that truth made the room quiet, as if every heart wanted to listen more deeply. Keanu paused, looked down for a moment, and then smiled again. It was not the mask he had worn earlier backstage. It was the kind of smile that comes after facing pain and still choosing to stand. The crowd erupted in applause, but he raised his hand gently, asking them to let him continue. Behind the curtain, Anna and Sydney watched. They were no longer just colleagues or fellow artists. They were witnesses to a man fighting silently, and they knew he was allowing the world to see a side he usually hid. Anna whispered, "He is not just performing tonight. He is sharing himself." Sydney nodded, her eyes fixed on the stage, and said, "That is what makes him different. He doesn't let pride cover his pain. He turns it into something others can learn from." But even as Keanu spoke with calm strength, there was still a storm inside him. Flashes of old memories crossed his mind, moments of loss, times when he had stood alone with no one beside him. His voice never broke, but his heart ached. And in the middle of his speech, as his eyes scanned the audience, he saw a boy in the front row. The boy was no older than 12, sitting with his mother. He had tears in his eyes, not from sadness, but from being moved. Keanu locked eyes with him for a brief second, and in that gaze, something powerful happened. The boy's small smile gave Keanu courage, while Keanu's gentle nod gave the boy hope. That exchange lasted only a breath, but it stayed with Keanu. He realized then that his pain was not wasted. By standing there, by smiling through it, by choosing to be kind even when his heart was heavy, he was giving others a reason to believe. He had always thought strength meant hiding scars, but tonight he learned that showing them could heal more than just himself. The applause rose again when he finished, and this time he let it fill the room. He let the sound remind him that even in brokenness, people could find connection. He bowed humbly, not with pride, but with gratitude. The audience saw a man who respected them, not as fans, but as human beings who shared the same struggles of life. Backstage, as he walked off, Anna and Sydney were waiting. They didn't cheer, they didn't shower him with praise. Instead, Anna simply placed her hand on his shoulder, steady and kind. Sydney looked into his eyes and said softly, "You gave them honesty tonight. That is rare." Keanu nodded, and for the first time in many years, he felt that his silence had finally spoken louder than any role he had played. But deep down, he also knew something else. This was only the beginning. The real challenge would not be the stage, nor the crowd. The real challenge would come when the lights turned off and he had to face the long night with his own thoughts. And as he left with Anna and Sydney by his side, he wondered quietly if he was ready to face that test. The night behind the lights, the event ended, and the roar of the crowd slowly faded into silence. Keanu stepped into the night air, the city glowing with restless energy all around him. The cool wind touched his face, but instead of relief, it carried memories he had been trying to bury. The truth was simple. Every smile he gave to the world came with a shadow. Tonight, he had let the audience see part of that shadow, but deep inside, his battles were far from over. Anna walked beside him, her steps calm, her eyes watching him carefully. She was not looking at the actor the world adored. She was looking at the man who carried weight on his shoulders, even when no one asked him to. She had learned something important tonight. Keanu's greatest strength was not his fame or his talent. It was his humility, his ability to keep walking even when the road inside him was broken. Sydney walked on the other side, quiet but steady. She did not ask questions, and she did not try to comfort him with empty words. She understood something many did not. Sometimes the deepest kindness was not to fill silence, but to share it. Keanu glanced at them both, and for the first time in years, he felt he did not have to hide every part of his truth. They reached a small restaurant, a quiet place far from the bright noise of the city. Keanu stopped at the door, almost unsure if he wanted to step inside. He had avoided such places many times before, afraid of people watching, afraid of being recognized when he wanted to disappear. But tonight, Anna smiled and said, "Let's sit. No crowd, no lights, just us." And Sydney added, "Sometimes the simplest table gives the deepest peace." Keanu nodded and followed them in. The restaurant was almost empty. A soft song played in the background, and the smell of fresh food filled the air. They sat at a corner table, away from others. For a while, no one spoke. Keanu looked down at the glass of water in front of him, and his thoughts began to rise. He thought of moments when he had lost people he loved, of nights when he had been alone in rooms that felt too quiet, of days when the world celebrated him while he felt like a shadow inside. He tightened his hands slightly, as if to hold the pain inside. Anna noticed and leaned forward. "You don't always have to carry everything alone," she said. Her voice was soft, but her words felt like they touched something inside him. Sydney then added, "You give so much kindness to the world. Maybe it's time you let kindness reach you too." Keanu looked at them both, and for the first time in the night, his eyes grew wet. He blinked quickly, trying to hide it, but Anna and Sydney did not look away. They did not judge him. They did not pity him. They simply respected his silence, letting him know that pain did not make him weak. It made him human. Just then, a moment unfolded that none of them expected. A man from another table walked over. He was middle-aged, dressed in simple clothes, and he looked nervous. He stood near them, hesitating before finally speaking. "Mr. Reeves," he said, his voice shaking. "I don't want to disturb you. I only wanted to say thank you. Years ago, when I was at my lowest, one of your interviews saved me. You spoke about loss, about finding strength even when you feel broken. Those words stopped me from giving up." Keanu looked at the man, stunned. His heart tightened, but not from pain, from a strange mix of sorrow and gratitude. The man bowed slightly, then walked back to his table without asking for pictures, without asking for anything more. He only wanted to give thanks. Anna and Sydney exchanged a glance, their hearts moved by what they had just witnessed. Keanu leaned back slowly, his breath uneven. "I didn't know," he whispered, almost to himself. "I didn't know someone was listening that closely." Sydney answered softly, "Sometimes the smallest things you do reach the deepest parts of people's lives." Anna added, Your kindness has already saved more people than you will ever know. Keanu lowered his head for a moment, his thoughts heavy but also lighter than before. He had always thought his pain was a silent battle, something he carried alone. But now, he realized something powerful. Even in his quiet struggles, his humility and kindness had created ripples that touched strangers in ways he could not imagine. Yet even as this truth settled in his heart, he also knew another test was coming. It was one thing to inspire others on stage or through stories. It was another to face the long nights when no one was watching, when the weight returned and silence became louder than applause. As they left the restaurant, Keanu felt both strengthened and unsettled. He smiled at Anna and Sydney, but deep inside, he wondered, would their kindness be enough to guide him through the darkness that still waited in the corners of his life? The weight of midnight, the night grew darker as they stepped out of the restaurant. The city was alive, but Keanu felt a silence pressing inside him again. Laughter and noise surrounded the streets, yet in his chest there was only the slow ache of memories. Anna and Sydney walked close, sensing his heaviness, but they did not push him to speak. They knew he needed space, and they respected that silence. When Keanu finally returned to his home, he stood at the doorway for a long time before stepping inside. The lights were dim, the rooms quiet, and every corner carried echoes of the past. He placed his coat down gently, but the weight on his shoulders did not leave. Anna and Sydney had given him strength earlier, and the man in the restaurant had reminded him that his kindness touched lives, but pain had a way of returning when no one else was near. He sat on the couch, his hands folded together, and his eyes rested on the floor. Memories surfaced, faces of people he had lost, moments he wished he could relive, nights when he had cried quietly but shown the world a smile the next morning. The truth was simple. He had mastered the art of appearing strong, but that strength had often cost him peace. As midnight came, his phone buzzed softly. It was a message from Anna. "You are not alone. Remember that." Moments later, another from Sydney. "The strongest thing a person can do is let kindness in." Keanu read their words again and again. It was strange how two short messages could bring warmth into an empty room. He leaned back, closed his eyes, and let out a slow breath. But even in that small comfort, a thought unsettled him. Why did he find it so hard to accept kindness for himself? Why did he feel that his pain was his to carry, not to share? Humility had always guided his life, but now he wondered if humility had also kept him too quiet, too hidden. The hours passed, and outside the window the city lights dimmed. Keanu finally stood and walked into his study. On the desk lay a stack of letters from fans, unopened for weeks. He picked one at random and opened it slowly. Inside, written in uneven handwriting, were words from a young woman. "Your movies saved me. Your interviews taught me to respect myself. I am still alive because your kindness reminded me not to give up." Tears filled his eyes. He placed the letter down, but his hands shook slightly. The realization hit him harder than before. While he struggled in silence, people out there were using his strength as their guide. While he thought his pain was invisible, his resilience had become a light for others. Suddenly, his phone rang. It was Sydney. Her voice was soft, almost like she already knew his thoughts. "Keanu," she said, "we don't always see the impact we make. But tonight, when you spoke, you gave people courage. And when that man came to thank you, it wasn't just him. It was thousands speaking through him. Don't forget that." Anna joined the call moments later. "And remember," she added gently, "you don't need to fight every night alone. Sometimes letting people walk beside you is not weakness, it's trust." Keanu listened in silence. His heart felt heavy but also strangely calm. Their words reminded him of something he had forgotten, that kindness is not a gift meant only to give, but also to receive. He ended the call and stood near the window. The city stretched before him, endless and bright. He smiled softly, though his eyes were still wet. It was not the smile he gave the world on stage. It was a quiet, fragile smile of a man realizing that pain did not take away dignity, and accepting kindness did not take away strength. Still, as the night faded into early morning, Keanu knew this was not the end of his struggle. Every sunrise would bring new battles inside him, but now he also knew one truth. Anna and Sydney had chosen to walk with him, not because of who he was on screen, but because of who he was in silence. And that choice gave him something he had long forgotten: hope. The storm returns. The morning light crept into the room, soft and golden. Keanu had barely slept. His eyes were tired, but his heart carried a strange calmness from the words he had read and the voices he had heard the night before. Still, the weight was not gone. Pain does not vanish in one night. It hides, it waits, and sometimes it returns with even more strength. He made himself a cup of coffee and sat by the window. The streets below were alive with people rushing to work, children walking with backpacks, and the normal rhythm of life. Keanu watched quietly, wondering how many of them carried invisible battles, just like him. He thought of Anna and Sydney, of the way they had seen him without asking him to explain, and he felt a quiet gratitude. Later that day, he was scheduled for another appearance, a smaller event with only a few invited guests. He wanted to cancel, but his sense of respect and responsibility did not allow him. He believed that when people give their time, you must honor it. So he dressed simply, no grand look, only his usual humble presence. Anna and Sydney joined him again. They could see the heaviness in his eyes, but they also saw something new: determination. He was tired, yes, but he was choosing not to let the storm inside stop him. At the event, the room was intimate. People sat in a circle close enough to feel every word spoken. Keanu began to talk, not with the practiced tone of an actor, but with the honesty of a man who had seen both joy and sorrow. He spoke about resilience, about how life often tests the heart in ways no one expects. He admitted that pain never fully leaves, but kindness, whether from strangers or friends, gives strength to carry it. The room was silent, hanging on every word. And then, in the middle of his talk, something unexpected happened. A man in the audience stood up suddenly and interrupted. His face was tense, his voice sharp. "You speak about pain and kindness," the man said. "But you are a star, a millionaire, loved by millions. How can you know what real struggle feels like?" The air froze. People turned their heads, shocked by the bluntness. Anna and Sydney stiffened, ready to step in, but Keanu raised his hand gently, asking them to stay calm. He looked at the man, not with anger, but with compassion. For a moment, he said nothing. Then, in a quiet voice, he replied, "Pain does not ask about money or fame. Loss does not care who you are. Everyone carries battles that are invisible to the world. I do not claim my struggle is greater than yours, but I know what it feels like to wake up with an ache that does not go away." The man stared, his anger slowly melting into surprise. Keanu continued, "And I know that kindness is not about wealth or status. It is about small choices, when you listen instead of judge, when you give instead of turn away. That is something every human can give, no matter who they are." The room was silent again, but this time the silence was heavy with respect. The man lowered his head, unable to respond. Anna felt her chest tighten. Sydney's eyes softened. What they had just witnessed was not pride. It was humility turning conflict into understanding. When the event ended, Keanu walked out quietly, but his steps carried more weight than before. He had spoken honestly. He had faced doubt without anger. But inside, the storm was still alive. He had defended kindness, yet he wondered how long he could keep standing strong when the nights kept pulling him back into silence. Anna walked beside him and said gently, "The way you answered him, it was not just for him. It was for everyone who doubts that kindness matters." Sydney added, "And it was for yourself, too. You reminded your own heart that respect always wins over pride." Keanu looked at them both and gave a tired smile. It was true, but deep inside, he knew the hardest battle was still waiting. It was not on the stage, not in front of people, but in the quiet moments when no one was there to remind him he was not alone. As the evening came and the city lights flickered on, Keanu asked himself one question. Could he ever truly heal, or was he destined to only smile through pain for the rest of his life? Breaking the silence the night after the event was long. Keanu sat in his home again, the same quiet walls surrounding him. Outside, the world admired him, celebrated him, but inside, he still carried the weight of memories that never healed. He remembered the sharp words of the man from the audience. Though he had answered with calmness, the question still echoed in his mind. How can you know real struggle? The truth was, Keanu knew it too well. He walked to his bookshelf and pulled out an old notebook. It was filled with notes, sketches, and fragments of thoughts he had written over the years. Some pages were messy, words written in the middle of sleepless nights. Others carried quiet reflections about respect, kindness, and resilience. He turned the pages slowly, his heart heavy, until he reached a page he had written years ago. Smile, not because life is easy, but because it teaches strength. His eyes stayed on those words for a long time. It was a reminder of the man he had tried to be, someone who smiled through storms, who chose humility over pride, who respected even those who doubted him. But tonight, something inside him broke. The smile felt too heavy to wear all the time. The silence he lived in felt too deep to keep carrying alone. At that moment, there was a knock at his door. When he opened it, he found Anna and Sydney standing there. They hadn't told him they were coming, but their faces showed they knew he needed them. "We couldn't leave you alone tonight," Anna said softly. Sydney added, "Sometimes silence grows heavier when no one shares it. Let us sit with you." They stepped inside, and the three of them sat together. Keanu tried to hide his feelings with small smiles, but Anna spoke firmly. "Don't hide with us, not tonight." Her words struck him, and for the first time in years he let the walls around his heart fall. His voice trembled as he whispered, "I miss the people I've lost. Every day. I smile for the world, but inside, it hurts. It never leaves." The room was still. Sydney's eyes filled with tears, and Anna reached for his hand. She didn't say, "Be strong." She didn't say, "Move on." She only said, "It's okay to hurt. It's okay to not always be the one giving strength. Let others carry you too." Keanu's chest tightened, and tears finally fell. For years he had held them back, believing that showing them would make him weak. But tonight, in front of two people who chose kindness over pride, he let them flow. The silence broke, and with it a small part of the weight lifted. Anna leaned closer and said, "Your pain doesn't take away your dignity. It shows your humanity. That's why people respect you, not for hiding it, but for carrying it with humility." Sydney added, "And for letting others stand beside you. You don't have to be unbreakable to inspire. You only have to be real." Keanu closed his eyes, breathing deeply. Their words sank into his heart. For the first time in a long while, he felt that maybe healing was not about forgetting, but about allowing others to share the burden. He realized that resilience was not silence. It was choosing to keep walking, even if you needed help along the way. As the night stretched on, They stayed together. No cameras, no crowd, no applause. Only three people in a quiet room, choosing kindness over pride, respect over judgment, and trust over silence. And in that moment, Keanu understood something powerful. Maybe he was not destined to smile through pain forever. Maybe he was learning step by step to smile because kindness had finally reached him. The smile that stayed the next morning was quiet. Sunlight streamed into the room, soft and golden, touching the floor like a gentle hand. Keanu woke with his eyes heavy, but his heart felt lighter than it had in a long time. Anna and Sydney had left late at night after making sure he was not alone in his silence. Their words still echoed in his mind. It's okay to hurt. It's okay to let kindness in. He stood near the window, watching the city below. People hurried through their lives, carrying unseen battles. He realized now that he was not so different from them. Fame, money, or applause did not protect anyone from pain. Everyone carried storms, and everyone needed kindness to survive them. His phone buzzed with new messages. Some were from strangers online, fans who had heard his words from the event. One message read, "Your honesty gave me courage. Thank you for not hiding your pain." Another said, "You taught me that strength is not about silence, but about respect and humility." Keanu read them slowly, his eyes warm with tears. He had always feared that showing his wounds would make him less, but now he saw the opposite. His openness had become a bridge, connecting hearts that once felt alone. Later that day, Anna and Sydney visited him again. They sat in his living room, simple and quiet, just as before. Anna smiled and said, "You know, the world doesn't need you to be perfect. It just needs you to be human." Sydney added, "And you don't need to carry everything alone anymore. We are here, always." Keanu looked at them, his chest heavy with gratitude. "I thought my pain would always be mine to hide," he said softly. "But now I see it can be shared, and in sharing, it doesn't feel as heavy." The three of them talked for hours, not about fame, not about roles or careers, but about life, about struggles, about the small acts of kindness that keep people alive. Every story shared between them built something stronger than pride. It built trust. As evening fell, they walked together outside. The city lights glowed, but Keanu's eyes were brighter than the streets around him. People recognized him. Some waved, some smiled. He smiled back, not the polite mask of old, but a genuine deep smile that came from inside. It was a smile born not from hiding pain, but from finding hope. Anna leaned toward Sydney and whispered, "That smile is different now." Sydney nodded, her voice low. "Yes. It's no longer a smile through pain. It's a smile because kindness finally stayed." Keanu heard them, and his heart warmed. He turned to them both and said, "You chose kindness over pride. You reminded me that humility doesn't mean silence. It means allowing others to stand with you. Thank you for giving me back something I thought I had lost." They walked on, three souls bound not by fame, not by power, but by respect, resilience, and kindness. And for the first time in years, Keanu felt that he was not carrying the storm alone. He was walking with people who saw him not as a star, but as a man, and that made all the difference.